With the Illinois House in session, you've got a lot of action happening. Of course, they got a bill deadline Friday where they got to get bills out of the Illinois House. But there's other drama unfolding, as we've seen happen over the past several weeks. Whenever the House goes into session, some people are wearing masks, others aren't wearing masks. But this, of course, as we see the mask mandate being lifted for schools and most other settings, and even last night, I think I counted maybe 2 or 3 masks inside the joint session of Congress where President Joe Biden was delivering his State of the Union address. So a lot of areas moving on from masks, but not the Illinois House. It is the WMAY morning news feed. I'm Greg Bishop, and we're joined now in studio by an individual who's been ejected now. I can't count how many times, 4 or 5, how many times?
It's way too many, Greg. But
State Representative Blaine Wilhour with us here in studio on the WMAY morning news feed. So yeah, yesterday was what, the 5th time or so?
I've lost count, and like I said yesterday, it's not something that I really enjoy doing. But I think it's very enlightening that as you say, there's a few of us that have been voted to be kicked out of there 3, 4, 5 times, but we haven't taken a single vote in the last 2 years on the authoritarian mitigation rules that the governor has. It's the theater of the absurd in the House there, and I was so dangerous, Greg, that they kicked me out. But they voted to kick me out, but they let me stay in there and walk around.
Well, and I watched a little bit of that from above. And, when the vote happened, of course, several of the members that weren't wearing masks left the building, or left the chamber at least. You persisted and sat there, but they ultimately kept you from being able to vote. What happened there?
Well, they just took my key and said that I couldn't vote, which is basically disenfranchising my entire district. There's they say that going remote and doing that option is the same, but it's clearly not. You can't interact, you can't debate bills, and the bottom line is we need to get back to sanity. Like you said before, Greg, the whole world is moved on. It's just it's a couple people in the Illinois General Assembly that are either scared or they're just extremely spiteful. Either one is unacceptable. And if you're, the whole General Assembly, the state of Illinois, all of my districts shouldn't be held hostage to the irrational fears of a couple people. It's completely ridiculous. If they're scared, they need to go remote.
Well, and that point was made by one of your colleagues, State Representative Adam Niemerg, saying that, if individuals are worried to that level, then they should be the ones that dial in.
Right.
So we did see some of the representatives do remote. Did you eventually go remote, or did you stay on the House floor that entire time?
I stayed on the House floor yesterday. I've gone remote in the past, but I think it's important to be there. And I was already there. I'd already made the trip up here, Greg. So I just decided that I'm staying in there, and I talked to the doorkeeper. They were very cool and supportive about it, and said that if there's absolutely anything that I need, just let them know. They're tired of it too, Greg. Everybody's tired of it.
Well, when it comes to you staying on the House floor, having your key taken away so you can't actually hit the vote yes, no, or present button, you are in a lawsuit right now, right? What's the latest on that, where you're suing the Speaker of the House?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not crazy about suing people. I've never really done it before, but at some point you gotta stand up. Basically, Greg, it's the same argument that we are making for the past 2 years against IDPH and the Illinois State Board of Education, that they couldn't come in and make rules that superseded existing state law. And I contend that applies to the House of Representatives too. The House of Representatives is in no better position to make a rule that clearly violates the law, that clearly violates due process, than what these out-of-control agencies were. And these people need reined in. It's clear that they're not giving up on this. I mean, like we said, the rest of the world's moved on. It's time that we do the same. And if we got to make that happen in court, we'll do that, and we'll let the chips fall where they may. But I'm not ashamed or scared of that argument. I think that it's solid. That it's solid logic.
Well, what do you say to those who are like, listen, I mean, there's no pants, no shoes, no service, no shirts, no service type thing on businesses, or it's just a mask. Why not just comply? Or it's a health issue for some. Why not just comply? What's your response to that?
Well, I mean, why not just comply with anything and everything? We've gone through two years of that, and hiding behind the dress code and that kind of stuff and protocol and all that, it doesn't make sense. This is clearly an issue of public health. They're clearly ejecting us from the chamber based on us being a public health risk, and if that's the case, then it should be subject to the Public Health Act.
So it's not like you being told to put on a sports jacket, right, for instance, which is part of the decorum. Right?
They're trying to hide behind decorum on it. They're saying this is a rule of decorum, but when you read the rule, it is clearly, it says that any time that we're in a COVID disaster, this rule is in effect. That's clearly a rule of public health, and if it's a rule of public health, it needs to be subject to the Public Health Act, which calls for either consent of the individual or a court order, and we're pushing the issue on that because the bottom line is that we need to just restore sanity in there. It's out of control. Everything is completely out of control.
We're talking with State Representative Blaine Wilhour here in studio on the WMAY morning news feed now 6:46, and Representative the state representative who has been the one motioning for this time and again. Each time you guys have been ejected, she motions and calls you guys out. She tends to talk about people who look like her, who are more impacted by COVID and so on. What's your reaction to some of the statements that she's put out there in the past week and a half or so?
Representative Collins has shown herself to be one of the weakest individuals in the General Assembly. Last week she was triggered by somebody getting angry at her on the House floor because she made a conscious decision to insert herself into what she knew would be a controversial issue. We're sitting state representatives. We should be a little bit tougher than that. If we're going to voluntarily insert ourselves into a controversial issue, you should expect blowback, and people shouldn't have to apologize for it. Now, she's made a point of trying to bring race into this every time. She, talks about people who look like her. I don't know if she's talking about her physical characteristics or her race. I assume she's talking about her race. Being disproportionately impacted. And I don't necessarily disagree with that, Greg, but I think that she's pointing the fingers the wrong way. If she's disappointed about the people who look like her being disproportionately impacted, she needs to turn to her left and look at the people who look like her colleagues who are putting these mitigations in place and hiding in their basement and forcing the working class people to go out and expose themselves. Put themselves out there and deliver the goods and services so that they can play on their laptops and sip their lattes in their basement. It's ridiculous. And we need to have a conversation about that because these people, these leftists, in the state of Illinois, they're the ones that forced the working class people out there into a greater harm than certainly they were willing to do.
State Representative Blaine Wilhour with us on the WMAY morning news feed. I did listen last night. I was even having dinner, kind of listening in an earpiece while I'm trying to have a conversation with my wife.
You need to get a life, Greg.
God, you're telling me. I heard the representative's name brought up multiple times. Hey, House Bill whatever, Representative Collins, out of the record. Representative Collins, I think it was about 2 or 3 times where I guess a bill that she was sponsoring was brought up, but it was not brought up because it was pulled out of the record. Was she not on the floor at that time?
No, she was there. I think that she's probably finding herself increasingly unpopular, even with her own side of the aisle. If you look at the vote, it's getting less and less votes every time. There's people on her own side that are done with it. I think there was 15 people on the Democrat side of the aisle almost that abstained from voting on it. So. She's not doing herself any favors. And like I said, I talked to many of the Democrats and I appealed to the common sense ones, the very few that are over there. And, they're tired of it too.
State Representative Blaine Wilhour with us. Can you stick around for another segment?
Sure.
Talk a little bit about what you think could possibly happen before you guys adjourn April 8th. So it's right here on the WMAY morning news feed. I'm Greg Bishop. Now 6:50, and we will take a break, but get you that
4. Connected with 92.7 WMAY. Everywhere with the WMAY app.
All right, back in studio with State Representative Blaine Wilhour on the WMAY Morning News Feed. I'm Greg Bishop, and Representative. We were talking a bit last segment about you being expelled from the House chambers time and again for not wearing a mask. You do have that lawsuit against the Speaker. Your attorney, Thomas DeVore, is also a constituent of yours, and he's got, of course, that high-profile case that went all the way up to the Illinois Supreme Court but was shot back down to the Circuit Court. We do have a date, March 10th, in the temporary restraining order he has motioned against Chicago public schools for continuing to mask kids there. But you've got a date now also for your case against Speaker Wells. Tell us about that.
Right. Yep. Talked to Tom yesterday, and we did finally get a date. We were we filed this obviously in Bond County last week, and they transferred it up to here, and finally got a date yesterday, March the 9th. So Tom's going to be a busy man in Sangamon County.
So what kind of relief are you guys looking for? Is it a kind of a TRO of sorts initially, and then to kind of argue the specifics of the case?
Right. Yeah. No, we're looking for a TRO very similar to what's been issued against these public schools that have denied students their due process over quarantine and masking. It's basically the same argument, Greg.
So we've got, of course, the legislature in session till April 8th. It's an election year. We have all of the COVID-19 situation playing out. But what do you think is possible to be accomplished, given the short time frame here and all of the other issues that are facing Illinois, from outbound migration to pension debt to high taxes and so on?
Yeah, unfortunately, Greg, I don't foresee a whole lot happening on that. We need major structural reforms in this state, and it's something that the Democrat Party and some people in the Republican Party are, when it comes right down to it, aren't super interested in doing it. Because when you tackle these structural reforms like the pension system and the sheer volume of government, if we want to lower property taxes in the state of Illinois, those two things have to be tackled. But when you start looking at tackling those, some pretty powerful, pretty well-funded special interests step in, and they're very invested in the status quo. So, I don't see a whole lot happening there, but the governor is being very, very disingenuous, and the General Assembly is being very disingenuous, saying that, our economic situation is good. We have this budget surplus. The only reason we have a budget surplus is because inflation is out of control. We have a budget surplus because sales taxes and those things are going way up because costs of goods are increasing by 30 and 40. And, I'm in the construction industry, and some things there have increased by 500%. That's why we have a surplus, and it's not good. My buddy Mark Batnick says we're on the sugar high side of the inflation. And it's the hammer is going to drop, and it's going to disproportionately drop on the working class people, the fixed income people, the seniors. So it's more imperative right now than it ever has to do some of these structural reforms. And they talk about this budget surplus. We have per capita, or in total dollars, less of a budget surplus than every state around us. And in fact, even the state of Mississippi, the poorest country in the United States, has more of a budget surplus than Illinois. So we need to be more realistic about what we're actually looking at here.
What can be done? And we've got just about a minute left here. What in your eyes can be done to reverse outbound migration?
Well, we need to focus on quality of life issues here in the state. We have a lot to offer. We have everything that we need to be successful. We're just burdened with generations of terrible public policy. The biggest thing we need to do is lower property taxes and get people to invest here in Illinois to create good, high-paying jobs, high-wage jobs. We had that at one time here. We should be building things in Illinois because we can do it and get them efficiently anywhere in the world. But bad policy is keeping us from doing that. So we need smart deregulation, and we need smart tax reform that's going to put investment back in the state and put people to work.
State Representative Blaine Wilhour, appreciate your time this morning, being with us in studio. We'll likely talk again as you guys are going to be in session all week and next week and the week after. But also you got that temporary restraining order March 9th here in Sangamon County with your lawsuit against the Speaker over mask rules in the Illinois House. We'll talk about that more in the future as well. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg.
It is the WMAY morning news feed. Now we've got about 8 o'clock, and we've also got the council roundup coming up next here on